There's an old saying, if you want to know who rules over you, look at who you are not allowed to criticize. Well, it's becoming very clear in the city of Deltona who we're not allowed to criticize. And the funny thing is the local media. Now, this is the media that claims to be the credible media. Credible media. They seem to be carrying water. I mean, really carrying water for the city of Deltona. So we're going to go through a few recent articles, and you decide yourself, after at least, getting a different opinion, whether you find these sources to be as credible as they claim. So we can start here with, this was from the Beacon. After getting a deal on election felonies, Deltona manager survives another ouster attempt. And, Al didn't miss the mark too much. I think him saying, in a 4.5-hour meeting, June 17th, during which passions ran high and vile and coarse language poured forth in abundance. I think that's a bit much there, Al, to call it vile. And I think the courts would very much disagree with you. Was it coarse? Absolutely. Did it need to be coarse? Absolutely. When you've got a mayor that is handing down an edict like she is the queen as to what you are allowed to say and what you are not allowed to say, then yes, she has to be challenged. And that challenge will continue until she decides that she's no longer going to sit up there on high and give demands on the way people are allowed to address her. You might want to go read a few of the court's decisions on language. One of the most beautiful lines that I recall from a Supreme Court decision was, one man's vulgarity is another man's lyric. The reason for that being written in the majority opinion was to state that everybody has their own way of interpreting and what may be considered, coarse language, vulgar language, profane. I mean, we've seen that in all these local articles, profane, vulgar, vile. Well, everybody has their own interpretation. And since, no two people are necessarily going to feel the same way about it, the courts have said that this is free speech. Okay? You may not like it, but this is free speech. There are over 35,000 known uses for the F word. Okay? And only about a dozen of those have any type of that refer to anything sexual in nature. All right? The courts have been very clear that only when it is specifically referring to a sexual act or is sexual in nature or is intended to elicit a sexual response can that language be considered vulgar. So, F you, not vulgar. You're a bunch of effing morons, not vulgar. All right, so let's just get that straight. Legally speaking, you can have your own opinion on that. That's fine. But legally speaking, not vulgar. Shang's pretrial diversion requires her to pay thousands of dollars in fines and fees to avoid prosecution. Now, you can go back and go to one of our earlier videos on this where we go line by line by line through the documents, through the charging documents, through the deal itself. There are no fines. Not a single fine. There are court costs. There are costs for to the Department of Corrections for her probation. And there is the cost of the investigation that has to be paid back to FDLE. But, Al, there are no fines. If you want to call yourself a credible journalist, you may want to actually go read the documents and understand what you're reading. No fines, okay? She had to pay court costs, essentially. It was funny. They call, the cost of her prosecution, but yet she never prosecuted. So, but anyhow, she's not paying any fines. She's paying she's paying fees. Okay? Otherwise known as hidden taxes. He did get this right. The plea agreement also raised questions about a possible double standard of justice. Yeah. There is definitely a double standard of justice going on here. He went on to talk about Lauren King and his statement from the dais. Lauren, you did a great job up there. You tried. So, and Mr. King, Commissioner King, I'll give him the respect. He deserves it. He asked the question, what would happen to you or I if we were charged with felony violations? It's a very good question. What do you think would happen to you or I if we're charged with a bunch of felony violations? Now, I don't know about everybody out there. I know that not everybody, has an attorney on standby. Some of us do. Some of us have the means to go to war with this kind of stuff, to go to battle, to go fight in the courts. Not everybody does. Most people, I would say, probably don't have the means to go and fight a court battle when you've been wrongfully accused, especially, come on, look at, Brandy. Wrongfully accused of a felony by Jane Shang. Imagine if Brandy would have if she would have had to fight that in court, how much would that have cost her out of pocket to go and fight for her innocence? This was an out and out lie. And we're going to get to another city council that felt like Jane Shang was a liar here shortly. But we know that Jane Shang pushed another city employee to go and file felony charges on Brandy White. That was an out and out lie. How much would it have cost her to fight, to prove her innocence? So let's see. A lot of applause and cheers. Is she any better than any one of us up here? Is she above the law? Well, apparently she is. Is she above the standard of the code of conduct? Apparently she is. Or at least that's what this commission believes. I know that everybody out there has their own thoughts and opinions on why they will not fire this woman. And I know that one of them that seems to be very prevalent, that seems to rise to the top, is that she must have some kind of dirt on 5 commissioners that sit up there. And that these 5 commissioners, this supermajority, are so afraid of her because of the dirt she has on them that they refuse to vote to fire her. This is my personal opinion. Now, think about this, okay? Think about going back, and we're going to address El Paso. Personally, my opinion is, I think that one thing that Jane Shang is probably very good at is cooking books and keeping 2 sets of books. If you've got a city commission that is, come on, we have a former mayor that somehow, after the city incorporated, he became the mayor and then went on to become a millionaire on an ex-postal worker's pension. Okay. So think about it. If there's a lot of people out there making a lot of money off the city of Deltona, and you need somebody who knows how to cook books, to keep 2 sets of records. This is why we need to get the state involved. We need to get the state in here. They need to come in here. They need to throw everybody out of City Hall and come in with a warrant and take everything. Take every record, everything, take it over and find the second set of books. Yes, there was a lot of chants of Shang must go, lock her up, lock her up. Heidi, yes, you are a disgrace, but that's another matter for another day. And just for my viewers out there, and anyone who happens to see this, doing a lot of research. Got a lot of research going on. I've actually employed someone overseas to do a little bit of research for me. So looks like we're going to come up with some pretty interesting stuff on Heidi. Let's see. Heidi warned a speaker identified as Liberty Cause to refrain from profanity. The speaker responded with a barrage of F-bombs and vows to sue the City Commission for allegedly restricting free speech. Yeah, that's absolutely true. If if she decides to get stupid, which I believe she will, given enough time, I believe she will get stupid. We are ready to fight for liberty. Bradford, now we're talking about Commissioner Bradford, expressed her dismay with the public spectacle. This is an embarrassment to me, she said, adding she worries about the impressions people, especially young Deltonans, may have of the city as they watch replays of the profane and vulgar proceedings. Well, Al, we were all out there when you talked to Ms. Bradford, Commissioner Bradford, another one who deserves a little respect. And I think you took that a little out of context. Probably because, there were several people out there recording. I would imagine that there probably are some recordings that will prove that was taken a little out of context. So again, credible journalism, you decide. Now, so I want to just point something out real quickly here. This is from an older article back in January. And so on December 5th, the anonymous complaint was made against Shang to the Department of State's Division of Elections. Let me set the record straight on something. It was not an anonymous complaint. It was several anonymous complaints. They all held the exact same information. Okay? They all laid out the crime. They laid out the statute. They laid out the punishment. But they actually came from multiple people. When the Department of State originally looked at it and decided that, they didn't think there was anything there, when Ashley decided, there's nothing here. Then there were just a couple of us left that went back and went over her head, laid it out in finer detail, and she was then forced to push it back down to the state attorney's office for an investigation. But here we have, on December 10th, shortly after the News Journal asked Shang about the complaint, she called the county's supervisor of elections office and changed her address to her home in Deltona. Shortly after the News Journal asked Shang about the complaint. So the News Journal was still investigating this on December 10th. Called her for comment. The Liberty Cause published. Deltona City Manager Jane Shang falsifies voter registration. Look. Published on December 10th. So, kind of makes you wonder, did she go to go to Lisa Lewis and change her address because the News Journal called, or because there was already a video out there laying out her crime? So now we'll go over to another one. Just a couple of things in this article that, So yeah, Heidi Herzberg reads this whole thing. No person shall engage in disorderly or boisterous conduct, whistling, stamping your feet, booing, or making loud, threatening, or slanderous utterances and statements is not allowed. Well, okay, threatening, absolutely, not allowed. Problem is, what these people consider threatening is there's where the problem lies. Threatening is, I'm going to come up there and commit an act of violence against you. Or at some later date, I'm going to commit an act of violence against you. Okay? I'm going to haul you into court is not threatening. That is not considered threatening language legally. Again, legally, not considered threatening language. Threats are threats of physical harm, threats of physical violence. Okay? Hauling you into court is not threatening. Slanderous utterances or statements. Slanderous essentially means that it's not true. So, and can be proven not to be true. Does that mean that someone cannot share their opinion? You know, if someone were to say, Heidi Herzberg, I think you're a Nazi. You're acting like a Nazi. Is that slanderous? No, that's an opinion. A lot of people actually hold that opinion, as a matter of fact. Again, more on that when our overseas investigation is done. So, though Herzberg gave a few people warnings and used her gavel at times, no one was removed from their meeting, which featured an additional Volusia, I love that, featured an additional Volusia County Sheriff's deputy keeping watch. What, was he going to break into song? He was a featured player? No, actually, that sergeant was a really cool guy, and he respected everyone's rights. And after the meeting, you know, we spoke to him, and he was very clear on the fact that he was there to protect the rights of everyone. So kudos to him. You know, in a phone interview Tuesday, Herzberg said it was unfortunate the meeting got out of hand, but she wanted to make sure everyone's First Amendment rights were respected. Heidi Herzberg does not care about your First Amendment rights. She's shown that time and time again. We have other old video of her we can play over and over again to prove she doesn't care about our rights. What she cares about is, you know, don't say anything bad about me. Now, here's the one thing in this article I really wanted to get into. While the mayor always asks speakers to provide their name and address for the record, several residents used fake names, and the commission's operating guidelines and meeting rules and procedures don't state that a speaker must provide a real name. So to all you people who do go or are planning to go, I want you to think about something. When you get up there and you give your name and you give your address, you're also giving away, I'm not home right now. Now, we all know there's a lot of crime in Deltona. So, and think about that. Jane Shang wants to hide her address. The city manager wants to hide her address. Go try finding Heidi's. Now, we already have it, but she's exempt, wants to hide her address, right? Why? Is she afraid of being a victim of crime? Well, shouldn't anybody and everybody who walks up there and gives their name and address be afraid that I've just told anybody who's watching this, I'm not home? So come on in. I mean, come on, think about it. Why is it so important for the commission and the city manager to hide their information? But, you know, if somebody else comes up there and doesn't want to give their name and address, they get a hard time about it. And we've seen this time and time again. And again, we have this on video. It is the second time this year that a motion was made to fire Shang. And then, as always, it was a 5-2 vote. Now, here's another thing that I want you to think about. Okay, hopefully you're sticking with me here. I want you to think about this. What would be the reason for us to fire her in a matter that is predetermined by the commission to be a private matter? Nabik asked in a phone interview Tuesday. It wasn't city business. So let's think about a couple of very key words in this sentence. Predetermined. That means the commission had already gotten together and decided this was a private matter. Now, if we go back to this old article, when this first happened, Heidi Herzberg, if something is there, it needs to be acted upon. She wasn't calling it back in January. She wasn't calling this a private matter. If something is there, she fully supports the matter being investigated. The matter was investigated, and FDLE found her in violation of 6 felony crimes. They gave a probable cause statement to the state attorney's office. R.J. Larizzar, by the way, elected person, remember that. 7th Judicial Circuit State Attorney R.J. Larizzar, elected individual, handed over 6 felonies, and they said, nope, we're just going to let her off scot-free. Then he says it wasn't city business. So does that mean that any of us can literally go use City Hall any way we see fit? So anybody out there want to open up a sandwich shop or florist, just go find a little space in City Hall, set up camp, and tell them this is a private matter, this is not city business. Because I guarantee you, they're going to come back and tell you, you're in City Hall, this is city property. You can't just come in here and start selling selling muffins or brownies or whatever in City Hall without permission. Makes it city business, doesn't it? She used City Hall as her address. Makes it city business. Predetermined by the commission. This coming from Nabik, the one who was so adamant about bringing her here. Attempts to suspend or get rid of Shang began in December after an anonymous voter fraud complaint was made to the state. Yeah, we already know that. We know that it was actually several anonymous complaints that all came in at once, one right after another. Commissioner Lauren King took about 25 minutes and gave a very heartfelt speech. Here's the reality, going back to the Beacon article. She must pay over $5,400 in fees. No fines, Al, no fines. Perform 100 hours of community service, write a letter in which she acknowledges and accepts responsibility. Go back to our an earlier video we've already posted to see that letter and see if you think that she took responsibility for anything. So Nabik says, now if she would have been criminally charged, I would have been the first one to make the motion. But she wasn't criminally charged, and she admitted to making a mistake. Did you not read the probable cause affidavit from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement? Okay, when law enforcement brings paperwork to, and I'm going to say this very slowly for you, when law enforcement brings paperwork, a probable cause, that affidavit to the state attorney, that is filing charges. FDLE filed charges with the state attorney's office. Criminal felony charges. No, you're not the brightest tool in the shed, again, my opinion. But you have managed to get away with running a business without a tax receipt. So, whatever. He said that while several comments made by members of the public crossed a line, the commission wants to make sure the public has plenty of opportunities to voice their concerns. Well, actually, no, we did not cross a line no one crossed a line into unlawful. Crossed a line maybe in your mind, but then again, in your mind, you don't believe that a probable cause affidavit charging document from Florida Department of Law Enforcement handed to the state attorney equals criminally charged. So I'm guessing at this point, your opinion doesn't really count for much. All right, so let's go on to one more here. And this was an opinion piece. And we're just going to kind of hover through a few little things in here. Deltona, Volusia County's biggest city by population. Given the median household income, an outsider might think that translates into overall prosperity, but that's not true. Probably not. Deltona continues to struggle to attract retail or commercial development. Yeah, absolutely true, because the commission makes it so incredibly difficult for anyone to come in here. So that is why people go to DeLand, why they go to Orange City, they go to surrounding cities. Right now, there is all this talk about, we've got this thing happening, got something happening, and we really don't want the city to look bad because we want this thing to happen. So, word to the wise, anyone on the commission, and you'll all get an email with the link to this. Learn when to shut up, and maybe, just maybe, you won't be made to look like idiots. And the city will not be made to look like the circus it is. Heidi, when you stop engaging in prior restraint, we'll stop challenging you on it. Keep doing it, and you can kiss your little projects goodbye. Because I'm sure that no one's going to want to come and play in your sandbox. And by the way, folks, let me tell you the real reason. It has absolutely nothing, zero, to do with what anybody's saying up there. If somebody goes up there and says, F you, Heidi, you're a Nazi, I don't know, Richard Bellick calling, Nabik a bootlicker. That's not what these people are looking at. What they're looking at is you voted 5-2 to keep a felon as your city manager. That's not honesty. You lack trust, and you have a felon for your city manager. So that's what's going to keep any kind of development out of here. Another thing that I want to just point out here, one resident hurled insults at city commissioners and called resident Mike Williams, president of the West Volusia branch of the NAACP, and a general supporter of Deltona government, a houseboy. Another speaker, okay, so let's talk about that for just a second. And again, my opinion, what I believe Pat Rice, who, by the way, we got plenty of photographs, plenty of things to prove. He's pretty close, pretty tight with Heidi, right? Pretty tight with a lot of those people up there. Looks to me like what he's doing is trying to take something that could be interpreted a multitude of ways and turn it into something racial. And he is doing that in a publication. When you do something like that in a publication, and then over here, he says it's reprehensible to use a racially derogatory phrase to describe a person. Racially derogatory. That's called libel, Pat. Mr. Bellick, if you hear this, I highly recommend that you go and seek counsel and have them take a look at this. Plenty of people have already saved copies of it, so finding it will not be a problem. And see if you have a case there for libel against this paper. Now, for some reason, we got an article here talking about, people shouting coarse language and having a felon for a city or for a city manager, but all of a sudden we're into septic tanks. Majority of its homes are on septic systems, which a recent news journal investigation pointed out it's a source of polluted water and West Volusia Spring. Where's your proof on that, Pat? Where's your proof that septic tanks have caused any kind of problem at all? And that it's actually not all the fertilizers, pesticides, and storm runoff. Pat? So I'm going to go on a little bit more here. He does get it right when he says that it's not a personal matter, it's a public matter. He did mention in here that, Shang, she tried to trespass Patty Gibson for seeking answers, seeking out the truth. What was that again? What was that? The old saying we started with? If you want to know who rules over you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. Patty Gibson criticized, and Jane Shang brought a false trespass against her. Did the same thing to Brandy White, filed a complaint. Shang also directed the city finance manager, what's her name, Camille Hooper, to file a complaint against Brandy White for illegal recording, which we all know was not illegal. It was actually very legal. The state attorney's office determined White didn't break any law. Well, how about if VCSO would have done their job? See, remember, VCSO actually brought charges to the state attorney's office. VCSO brought criminal charges. Remember what we talked about earlier, that NAVIC doesn't understand how that works. Shang has a reputation as an adept administrator. Really? Adept in what? Adept in causing trouble wherever she goes? Adept in, mismanagement? We have a $9 million center that is never going to pay for itself. She's adept at what? I'd love to know. But she does not seem, she does not seem good at building relationships with the general public. Her long-term future depends on improving that skill. Now, let's go take a look here. I'm going to play this little video from a long time ago in a city far, far away.
Why Deputy City Manager Jane Shang is on paid administrative leave.
Today, ABC 7 looked back at her final City Council appearance in April for clues. ABC 7's Pilar Ayres is live at City Hall with new information. Pilar?
Rick, city reps were scheduled to discuss Jane Shang's departure here at City Hall today, but instead the item was removed from the agenda, and we were given these documents that tell part of the story. As it turns out, former City Manager Joyce Wilson went straight to the Human Resources Department here at City Hall right after her appearance on April 22nd when she addressed council.
Mayor, can we vote?
I waited for this item for today.
Delete? And then if we
were going to get private briefings, well, you all should have told us, so I could have been part of the private briefings.
Interrupted by the city attorney, District 6 City Rep Eddie Holguin wanted to know why discussion about what happened to Mobility Services Deputy City Manager Jane Shang was requested to be deleted from the City Council agenda.
When I first put it on, there were a lot of questions that I needed answers to. And through some very long conversations with several people, I was able to obtain those answers.
April 22nd City Council meeting was Shang's last appearance there. She made a presentation to Council about downtown pedestrian pathway improvements, but frustrations from several council members came out about the way she does her job.
No, I said
it's almost like a smoke screen.
No.
You just pulling the wool over my eyes, and it ain't going to happen anymore.
Robinson and other council members questioned Shang's honesty and downtown's priority over funding for projects in their districts.
This guy says it's like a smokescreen. You've been pulling the wool over my eyes. They talk about honesty. Even in this article, it talks about honesty. Jane Shang, dishonest. So back in the early, at least we know 2014, prior to coming to Deltona in 2015, that Jane Shang's honesty has been in question. And somehow we still hired her. She spent the rest of her time on paid administrative leave. She will then be paid a vacation leave through April 14th, 2015, as decided by Wilson. Her salary, nearly $175,000 a year, and she will be eligible for a pension after only 7 years on the job, including more than 10 months on leave. 10 months that she was being paid by the city of El Paso prior to coming to Deltona. Are we starting to see a connection here, people? Are we starting to see history repeating itself? She's made sure. She had somebody who made sure she was eligible for a pension after 7 years there on the job. $175,000 salary as a deputy city manager. Paid administrative leave. That's protection, people. This is somebody protecting her. And we're seeing it right here in Deltona. Someone is always protecting her. That's a problem. It's a problem that needs to be resolved, a problem that needs to be addressed. He is correct here. Shang only has herself to blame for her voter registration issue. Both she and other city officials ought to stop describing it as a personal matter. Correct, it's not. She does receive a sizable public salary. And by the way, Pat, I want to point something out. If you were a businessman, really, are you old? I don't know. Are you that sexist that you would actually use the term if you were a businessman? How about business person? Because actually, if you look at statistics across the country, there are more new female-owned businesses popping up every year than male-owned businesses. So you might want to think before you're right up here, you say, it's bad to refer to a woman mayor. A woman mayor? I'm not just a mayor. Using a term that describes a female dog. I don't remember who did that, but kudos to them. Mob rule is not democracy. Pat, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. Okay? So, again, people credible. He's an editor for the News Journal. Credible. We don't live in a democracy. So, and, it says Deltona's residents should stand against it. What Deltona's residents need to stand against is the mob on the dais. And it's very clear who they are. The five. That's the five that get together, vote, and make sure that Jane is protected. Just like they did in El Paso. But if you were a businessman or a retail developer and you just read a news story about last Monday's meeting, or if you read this comment or this column, would you be inclined to plant roots in Deltona? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I would not be inclined to plant roots in Deltona, not because I would actually, say kudos to the fact that people are standing up to corruption in their government. That's not why I wouldn't open a business here. It's because of the mob on the dais. And it's because of the way the city does business and makes it almost impossible for new business to come in. So, we've looked at a lot of things here. There's a lot of stuff to consider. I say again, just how credible is our local media when it really seems like in a lot of ways they're carrying water for the City Commission. They're carrying water for Jane Shang. If you don't like the fact that people are angry, don't do things to make them angry. Thank you for joining me. This is the Liberty Cause. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please share this out on all social media that you're involved in. The more people we get this in front of, the better. And that is how we will finally, at some point, resolve this mess in Deltona, and we will send Miss Shang packing. Send her on her merry way to her next victim.